paddling into summer on the summer solstice. Paddling into summer on a soft flowing river, dipping our paddles like ladles into the sun-silvered water, into the sky-mirrored water, floating between high pillars of outstretched pines, fragrant sprays of wild azalea, flocks of native rhododendron, stirring through flotillas of lily pads and lotus flowers soon to open their buds, bending reeds tipped with delicate dragonflies. As the birds anoint the air with their even song, swallow to vireo, warbler to kingfisher, as we balance in our boats, in our beings, sensing into the sacredness, natureliness of this solstice, of this first unfolding of another summer, we three, a trinity of receiving bodies, reverent spirits. Welcome to the latest Floating Poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in, traveling in, to show 114 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the summer salted and colored coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. In broadcast 113, we tipped a hat to toppers of all kinds, to their wearers, appreciators, and observers, to their expressiveness, to places where they appear and accent, add color or character, in life, history, film, and literature, to poetic forms in nature and elsewhere we can find them in, not just on men and women's heads. This week, we're taking the scenic route, which may be slower or longer, but often far richer, more interesting, enlivening of an experience. Choosing this over speed, over expedience, where so much in haste and also on the overbeaten paths is so often missed or minimized. It could be making a many-day trip. It could be simply making a point of roaming around with a fresh and curious eye, ear, nose, inside your town or city, or inside yourself, through your less or unexplored inner landscape, all the while detouring consciously or intuitively, out of curiosity, out of spontaneity. So, let's relax, take some back roads of cultural commentary, poetry, and inquiry, take some time together off-piste, meander a while, and discover all kinds of beauty, serendipity, and other possibilities. Thought we might start with a quote from the poet Lynn Ungar. And you, what of your rushed and useful life? Imagine setting it all down, papers, plans, appointments, leaving only a note. Gone to the fields to be lovely. Be back when I'm through with blooming. Thank you, Lynn Ungar. And because isn't it the places we bloom in, whether they are spectacular or purely simple, the places we want to be in, to travel or move through, often or more often. We know what brings us more alive, what refreshes and renews. So how will you choose, or maybe already are choosing, joyfully choosing them, those places of blooming? From the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. If you drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco, there are two routes you can choose from. You can drive up Interstate 5. It's faster and there's not much to see other than cows and fields. The other option is to take the Pacific Coast Highway, which has some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. It takes twice as long, but there are twice as many reasons to stop, twice as many reasons to take your time, twice as many breathtaking views you wouldn't have otherwise seen. In my 5 years at Berkeley, I made the drive from San Francisco to LA dozens of times, and I never once took the scenic route. But I've been taking it every other part of my life ever since. When you put a destination into a GPS, you know exactly how to get where you're headed. Taking the scenic route means detours, unplanned stops, and unexpected turns. It means that things won't go according to plan, and your expectations won't always be met. It means having the courage to ditch your map for a compass and be guided by the thing that ensures your life will be interesting. But it also means you'll go places you never would have been, meet people you never would have met, and have experiences you never would have had. It means that amazing things will happen. Well, I'm just one person in the world, but I go as off-piste and the scenic route as often as I can, and I've had the most incredible life as a result, and I'm not going to stop doing it that way. Song of the Open Road, Walt Whitman's splendid ode to freewheelingness, and all we find in that spirit, if we have that spirit or come and call up that spirit on our way. Song of the Open Road. I'm just going to give you some few excerpts. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me, leading wherever I choose. Henceforth, I ask not good fortune, I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Done with indoor complaints, libraries, querulous criticisms, strong and content, I travel the open road. The earth, that is sufficient. I do not want the constellations any nearer. I know they are very well where they are. I know they suffice for those who belong to them. Still here I carry my old delicious burdens. I carry them, men and women. I carry them with me wherever I go. I swear it is impossible for me to get rid of them. I am filled with them, and I will fill them in return. From this hour I ordain myself loosed of limits and imaginary lines, going where I list, my own master, total and absolute, listening to others, considering well what they say. Allons, whoever you are, come travel with me. Traveling with me you find what never tires. The earth never tires. The earth is rude, silent, incomprehensible at first. Nature is rude and incomprehensible at first. Be not discouraged. Keep on. There are divine things well enveloped. I swear to you there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. Allons, we must not stop here. However sweet these laid-up stores, however convenient this dwelling, we cannot remain here. However sheltered this port, and however calm these waters, we must not anchor here. However welcome the hospitality that surrounds us, we are permitted to receive it but a little while. Thank you, Walt Whitman and friends. Let's follow in his exuberant footsteps, shall we? Shore Road, a poem from Cape Cod, from North Truro, Massachusetts. The shiss of slow cars down Shore Road, past our slant-roofed bungalow, past Astor and Larkspur, Violet and Zinnia, the Sea Spray Motel, the rows of rooftop gulls and shingled salt boxes, and the stretch of smooth stones glistening and cooling along the dark waterline of the now silent, now sleeping bay. The road to Kaliskya, a piece from the Cyclades, one of several summers exploring and enjoying there, where every day, road, path, drive, walk, and daydream was an out-of-the-ordinary excursion. The ochre earth road spools down, sails out, plunges into sapphire into the swaying sea. Marble-strewn coves shelter solitary boats, sun-blown branches, slow-swimming bodies. A lyre wind plays gently, lyrically, over the waters, over the wonders. Well, I want to tell you that I was inspired to make taking the scenic route the theme of this week's broadcast on finishing John Steinbeck's book, Travels with Charley, Charley, about his solo cross-country trip back in 1961 with his standard poodle, Charlie. I felt like I was with him the whole wonderful way, jaunting and discovering places and people and other parts and sides and the insides, interesting sides and insides of America. He once said, "People don't take trips. Trips take people." I recommend his candid, backroad, fresh-eyed adventure to you. Goodreads has this review of his book. In 1960, John Steinbeck set out on his camper truck with his dog Charlie to rediscover and chronicle his native USA, from Maine to California. He felt that he might have lost touch with its sights, sounds, and the essence of the American people. Moving through the woods and deserts, dirt tracks and highways to large cities and glorious wildernesses, Steinbeck observed with remarkable honesty, insight, and a humorous eye the gamut of America and the people who inhabited it. His 10,000-mile journey took him through almost 40 states where he saw things that made him proud, angry, sympathetic, and elated. A rugged and passionate adventure of self-identity, Steinbeck's vision of the changing world still speaks to us prophetically through the decades. And on that last note, I can tell you it amazingly does. I kept stopping and thinking, oh my goodness, we could have written this today in some ways. And speaking of Maine, this is Fernald's Neck. It's a poem from this preserve in Lincolnville, Maine, one Indian summer, heading to Maguntacook Lake. This was written for David and Lynn Bannister, friends of mine up there in Midcoast, Maine. Between woods and water, tapestries of autumn trees, a Winslow Homer water-colored lake, down a blue trail, to a sudden glacier-born rock, a Kong-sized boulder, balanced balletically here for thousands of years. Out to glint and stillness, a shadow of self on a stone-cropped shelf of shore, shadows of leaves, slow floating below a clear, pure surface. Out of Metropolis by Lynn Emanuel. We're headed for empty-headedness, the featureless amnesias of Idaho, Nebraska, Nevada, states rich only in vowel sounds and alliteration. We're taking the train so we can see into the heart of America, framed in the window's cool oblongs of light. We want cottages, farmhouses with peaked roofs, leashed by wood smoke to the clouds. We want the golden broth of sunlight ladled over ponds and meadows. We've never seen a meadow. Now we want to wade into one, up to our chins in the grassy welter, the long reach of our vision grabbing up great handfuls and armloads of scenery at the clouds of white sail, at the bargain basement giveaway of clods and scat and cow pies. We want to feel half of America to the left of us and half to the right, ourselves like a spine dividing the book in two, ourselves holding the whole great story together. Then suddenly the train pulls into the station, and the scenery begins to creep forward. The ramshackle shapes of Main Street, a Chevy dozing at a ribbon of curb, and here is a hound in a trolley, the street lights on their long stems. Here is the little park and the park stuff, bum on a bench, deciduous trees, a woman upholstered in a red dress, the bus out of town sunk to its chromium bumper in shadows. The noise of a train gathers momentum and disappears into the distance, and there is a name strolling across the landscape in the crisply voluminous script of the title page, as though it were a signature on the contract, as though it were the author of this story. Thank you, Lynn Emmanuel. This is from her collection from Then Suddenly. Dear listeners, we can travel any number of roads, paths, places, byways in the world just by opening a poem, a novel, a story, or entering a film that floats us to all kinds of otherly engaging and inviting settings and experiences. Here's Ted Kooser. So this is Nebraska. The gravel road rides with a slow gallop over the fields, the telephone line streaming behind, its billow of dust full of the sparks of red-winged blackbirds. On either side, those dear old ladies, the loosening barns, their little windows dulled by cataracts of hay and cobwebs hide broken tractors under their skirts. So this is Nebraska. A Sunday afternoon, July, driving along with your hand out, squeezing the air, a meadowlark waiting on every post. Behind a shelter belt of cedars, top deep in hollyhocks, pollen, and bees, a pickup kicks its fenders off and settles back to read the clouds. You feel like that. You feel like letting your tires go flat, like letting the mice build a nest in your muffler, like being no more than a truck in the weeds, clucking with chickens or sticky with honey, or holding a skinny old man in your lap while he watches the road, waiting for someone to wave to. You feel like waving. You feel like stopping the car and dancing around on the road. You wave instead and leave your hand out, gliding lark-like over the wheat, over the houses. Thank you, Ted Kooser. Well, we're encouraging slowerness. Here's Going Home, New Orleans, by Cheryl St. Germain. Some slow evenings when the light hangs late and stubborn in the sky, gives itself up to darkness slowly and deliberately, slow cloud after slow cloud. Slowness enters me like something familiar, and it feels like going home. It's all there in the disappearing light. All the evenings of slow sky and slow loving, slow boats on sluggish bayous, the thick middled trees with the slow-sounding names, oak, mimosa, pecan, magnolia. The slow tree sap that sticks in your hair when you lie with the trees, and the maple syrup and pancakes and grits, the butter melting slowly into and down the sides like sweat between breasts of slow-eyed strippers, and the slow-throated blues that float over the city like fog, and the weeping, the willows, the cut onions, the cayenne, the slow-cooking beans with marrow-thick gravy, and all the mint juleps drunk so slowly on all the slow southern porches, the bourbon and sugar and mint going down warm and brown, syrup and slow, and all the ice cubes melting and all the iced teas, all the slow-faced people sitting in all the slowly rocking rockers, and the crabs and the shrimp and crawfish, the hard shell slowly and deliberately and lovingly removed, the delicate flesh slowly sucked out of heads and legs and tails, and the slow lips that eat and drink and love and speak that slow, luxurious language, savoring each word like a long-missed lover, and the slow-moving nuns, the black habits dragging the swollen ground, and the slow river that cradles it all, and the chicory coffee that cuts through it all, slow-boiled and black as dirt, and the slow dreams, and the slow healing wounds, and the slow smoke of it all slipping out, ballooning into the sky, slow, deliberate, and magnificent. Thank you, Cheryl St. Germain. It's from her collection, Let It Be a Dark Rue. Here's Once by Tara Bray. It's, I think, as I think about part of the panorama of the world, certainly for me, it's the animal kingdom, the birds not least, and ones like the heron especially. I climbed the roll of hay to watch the heron in the pond. He waited a few steps out, then back, thrusting his beak under water, pulling it up empty, but only once. Later I walked the roads for miles, certain he'd be there when I returned. How is it for him, day after day, his brittle legs rising from warm green scum, his graceful neck curled, damp in the bright heat. It's a dull world. Every day the same roads, the sky, the dust, the barn caving into itself, the tin roof twisted and scattered in the yard. Again the bank covered with ox-eye daisy that turns to spiderwort, to chicory, and at last to goldenrod. Each year the birds, thick in the air and darting in wild numbers, grow quiet. The grass is thin, the light leaves earlier each day. The heron stood stone still on my spot when I returned, and then his wings burst open, lifting the steel blue rhythm of his body into flight. I touched the warm hay, hoping for a trace of his wild smell. I cupped my hands over my face, nothing but the heat of fields and skin. It wasn't long before the world began to breathe the beat of ordinary hours, stretching out again beneath the sky. Thank you, Tara Bray. Well, among other bodies of water that are constantly changing and inspiring, there are rivers. And in the UK, Olivia Lang, L-A-I-N-G, has a beautiful book on the wisdom of rivers that you might enjoy also, as I did. I was rereading it recently, or parts of it. In it, she records a 42-mile existential expedition. It's called To the River, A Journey Beneath the Surface. And here, in it she says, I wanted somehow to get beneath the surface of the daily world, as a sleeper shrugs off the ordinary air and crests toward dreams. A river passing through a landscape catches the world and gives it back redoubled, a shifting, glinting world, more mysterious than the one we customarily inhabit. Rivers run through our civilizations like strings through beads. And there's hardly an age I can think of that's not associated with its own great waterway. The Indus Valley, the Yellow River, these are the places where civilizations began, fed by sweet waters that in their flooding enriched the land. The art of writing was independently born in these four regions, and I do not think it a coincidence that the advent of the written word was nourished by river water. There's a mystery about rivers that draws us to them, for they rise from hidden places and travel by routes that are not always tomorrow where they might be today. Unlike a lake or sea, a river has a destination, and there is something about the certainty with which it travels that makes it very soothing, particularly for those who've lost faith with where they're headed. There are sights too beautiful to swallow. They stay on the rim of the eye. It cannot contain them. We talk of drinking in a sight, but what of the excess that cannot be caught? So much goes by unseen. No matter how long I stayed outdoors, there was a world that would remain invisible to me, just at the cusp of perception, glimpsable only in fragments, as when the delphinium at dusk breathes back its unearthly ultraviolet blue. Thank you, Olivia Lang. Neil Donald Walsh said, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And could we perhaps say at the end of your so familiar road? Which leads me to some questions about taking the scenic route. Questions for you. When was the last time you took a scenic route? Going on a trip, or from known to known place, or simply meandering somewhere? How often do you slow down, and really take in the scenery, whatever it is, with your whole body, with many senses? A landscape, a vista, a horizon, something large, something small, the clouds over your head, the moon, the stars. Or even just more fully and quietly and freshly enjoy the details and elements right around you, the scenery of a place you live in, a room, or some unvisited corners of your own neighborhood or nearby town. What wonderful, welcome experiences, serendipities have you had going on back roads, on rarely traveled walking or hiking paths, or winding waterways, rivers, footbridges? What stories from those experiences are you still telling? What of the route or routes you're choosing for your way through life as we speak? living your days? Could they be less familiar and more interesting, more spontaneous, and wider open to surprise and adventure? Could they be deliciously slower, and maybe as a result, much more satisfying? And what back roads of yourself have you yet to explore or explore more of? Questions for you. I've spoken in other programs of flaneurs and being a flaneur on other occasions, and it's something so rewarding to the eye and imagination to do often. Like here along Court Street in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, one September day a few years ago. An Atget day after Eugène Atget, the photographer of France way back in time. No bellows, negatives, or long exposures. Only a stream of silent reflections rendered in the lens of my third and fourth eyes as I flaneur about in the early morning light among the sleeping shops lining the west side of the village street, all steeping in the clear September sun. Each front its own endlessly faceted glass plate, holding intaglios of inner and outer space objects, intersects of still and moving moments, revealing scenes, mise en scène soon to vanish in the stirring of the city's clockwork men and machines, and the day's arriving congress and commerce. Well, who for me was ever on a scenic journey, always saw and savored the scenes and scenery amazingly, was Amy Lowell. And she wrote many poems. I'd love to share a bit of one and then maybe another with you on this time together. Towns in color, red slippers in a shop window, and outside in the street, flaws of gray, windy sleet. Behind the polished glass, the slippers hang in long threads of red, festooning from the ceiling like stalactites of blood, flooding the eyes of passers-by with dripping color, jamming their crimson reflections against the windows of cabs and tram cars, screaming their claret and salmon into the teeth of the sleet, plopping their little round maroon lights upon the tops of umbrellas. The row of white, sparkling shop fronts is gashed and bleeding. It bleeds red slippers. They spout under the electric light, fluid and fluctuating, a hot rain, and freeze again to red slippers, myriadly multiplied in the mirror side of the window. They balance upon arched insteps like springing bridges of crimson lacquer. They swing up over curved heels like whirling tanagers sucked in by a wind pocket. They flatten out heelless like July ponds, flared and burnished by red rockets. Snap, snap, they are cracker sparks of scarlet in the white, monotonous block of shops. They plunge the clangor of billions of vermilion trumpets to the crowd outside and echo in faint rows over the pavement. People hurry by, for these are only shoes, and in a window farther down is a big lotus bud of cardboard whose petals open every few minutes and reveal a wax doll with staring bead eyes and flaxen hair lolling awkwardly in its flower chair. One has often seen shoes, but whoever saw a cardboard lotus bud before? The flaws of gray, windy sleet beat on the shop window where there are only red slippers. Thank you, Amy Lowell. Well, even just the names of streets can be scenic. Like here, this was walking along the Thames, London, one August back in 2013. Walk of mine, local color. Angel Passage, Birdcage Walk, Greyhound Road, Great Windmill Street, Inner Circle, Rotten Row, Old Paradise Street, Snow Hill, Turk's Row, Upper Marsh, Wild Street. I remember. Well, let's zoom more into the microcosm, the landscapes of one and others' homes, houses, rooms, which can delight us depending on how we see and engage them. This is Zonnestralen. It's from Old Amsterdam, from the Netherlands, from Holland, 1998. It's about the top floor apartment of dear Dutch friends that I'd stay in when I was there, whenever I was there, and loved being in. You may have a room like that of your own that you used to go and visit somewhere afar. Zonnestralen. Beams of sun rise to the ceiling, raising all spirits and the rafters in this treetop bower, where warm rays give solace to any gloomy days or clouded hours. Yellow beams, the color of fresh butter and garden roses, the color your sure happiness is made of. Spelunking. This is from Molly McBride, dear friend, soul sister. I composed as I surveyed the objet in her studio in Brooklyn one May while I was a poet in residence, where I was actually a poet in residence several times over a couple of years, delightedly. Spelunking. So I'm encouraging you to go spelunking in different places that you visit, people's houses. In the underside layers of creation, formation, Mollyology, a petrified owl, wide-eyed if wooden to the touch, a Cajun-charred cochon, cue the Zydeco, a miniature lunar module carrying a love note through the universe, an unrung church bell, raise the gold-chased chalice, medley of songbirds mid-melody, two ocean bathers up to their neighboring thighs and eyes in blue. Summer sun warms their backs and shoulders. Faces with stories north to south, heart to heart, a gift from Miloš. Ripe fruit, hieroglyphics carved on the wall, a bridge, history, beauty. Spelunking. Lost Horizon. This is a poem I dedicated to the golden age of Hollywood actors. Ronald Colman, who was the lead in the movie of that same name in the 1937. It was about a group of survivors whose plane crashes in the Himalayas, or the Himalayas, as I think we actually ought to say it, and the paradise they discover. And it's sharing it in part to show how our reveries can be richly scenic. This was from Vieques Island off Puerto Rico. Lost Horizon. This was sitting, daydreaming. Our wood-spoked umbrella becomes a blue propeller that flies us out to sea and high up over the milky mountains of clouds to Shangri-La. Yes, one of the most beautiful landscapes I can think of is the imagination. What would yours be, other than the literal? And combined with a seemingly simple scene can be so transforming, so transporting. I'd welcome hearing of your transportings. Here's mine in Forte dei Marmi, the Tuscan Sea, the Tyrrhenian Sea, October 1997, sea cycle. A man rides his bicycle on the sea. Salt rubs the tires. Sun reflects on the soles of his shoes as he pedals over starfish and speckled crabs, under seagulls and threaded clouds, past fishermen and upright bathers, until the pier, where he turns left and follows the sun down over the horizon. On clear nights, when it's full or waxing, we can look up and around and get a wondrous eyeful free to us all of things like this. So Blue, an ode to the moon. Sag Harbor, New York, 1 January 2018. Ethereally blue, as it phosphoresces on the blankets of snow, duvetly draping the shrubs and statues in the unflowered garden, as it casts its curious spell of melancholy color on the clouds and overcoated trees, this moon, this unearthly, beautiful blue moon. Thinking about all the beauty appearing regularly over our heads, from cloudscapes to dramatic storms, even cinematic storms, to the nightly constellations, and as we just had July 4th here in Rhode Island and elsewhere, to fireworks. This is called Let the Fireworks Begin. The star showers, the wild flowerings, the palm trees and peonies, dahlias, chrysanthemums of high flying light, the waterfalls of sparks, colors, the bright night burnings embering down into dark, the flashes and shimmers of earth-flung comets, bracelets, diadems, the rocketing arcs you follow with wide-open eyes, almost held breath, till you oh and ah from the outbursts of silver and gold, emerald, rose, rare blue. Feel the ensuing booms reverberate in your belly as you lie face to sky on a widespread blanket, easy and cozy with friends, and savor all amid the dangling spangles and whizzing, crackling, whistling sounds, with innocent wonder, through the last fanfare, the blazing, rousing finale, the applause, the drifting clouds of smoke, and contented crowds. Let the fireworks begin. A Walk in the Scenery. This is Robert Sward's poem. S-W-A-R-D-S. Sward. A walk in the scenery. It is there, and we are there, in it, walking in it, taking, talking, holding hands, the nickel postcard, the glossy trees, the waterfalls, the unsuspecting deer. A scene shot from a car window, a slowly moving car with many windows and a good camera, and we are walking in it. We tell ourselves quietly, perhaps screaming quietly, we are walking in it, and our voices sound somehow as if we were behind windows or within. We embrace and are in love. The deer that we are watching at the same time, through cameras, binoculars, eyes, are so perfectly wild and concerned. With the scene they are, their glossy fate, silence, nature, their rotogravure pose, that they remain not watching, rather staring away from us into the earnest, green, and inoffensive trees. Thank you, Robert S. Sward. Well, we might also pause and ask how much, at any moment, anywhere, we're really seeing, embracing, embodying, or merely capturing without seeing or being a full part of. Some scene, some place. The Vacation by Wendell Berry. Once there was a man who filmed his vacation. He went flying down the river in his boat with his video camera to his eye, making a moving picture of the moving river upon which his sleek boat moved swiftly toward the end of his vacation. He showed his vacation to his camera, which pictured it, preserving it forever. The river, the trees, the sky, the light, the bow of his rushing boat behind which he stood with his camera, preserving his vacation even as he was having it, so that after he had had it, he would still have it. He would be there. With a flick of a switch, there it would be. But he would not be in it. He would never be in it. Thank you, Wendell Berry. Consolation by Billy Collins. And again, and here, he says there's so much beautiful scenery to be found as near as your elbow, your home, your own neighboring town or countryside. Consolation. How agreeable it is not to be touring Italy this summer, wandering her cities and ascending her torrid hill towns. How much better to cruise these local familiar streets, fully grasping the meaning of every road sign and billboard and all the sudden hand gestures of my compatriots. There are no abbeys here, no crumbling frescoes or famous domes, and there's no need to memorize a succession of kings or tour the dripping corners of a dungeon. No need to stand around a sarcophagus, see Napoleon's little bed on Elba, or view the bones of a saint under glass. How much better to command the simple precinct of home than be dwarfed by pillar, arch, and basilica? Why hide my head in phrase books and wrinkled maps? Why feed scenery into a hungry, one-eyed camera eager to eat the world one monument at a time? Instead of slouching in a cafe ignorant of the word for ice, I will head down to the coffee shop and the waitress known as Dot. I will slide into the flow of the morning paper, all language barriers down, rivers of idiom running freely, eggs over easy on the way. And after breakfast, I will not have to find someone willing to photograph me with my arm around the owner. I will not puzzle over the bill or record in a journal what I had to eat and how the sun came in the window. It is enough to climb back into the car, as if it were the great car of English itself, and sounding my loud vernacular horn, speed off down a road that will never lead to Rome, not even Bologna. Thank you, Billy Collins. Well, I was thinking about sharing a couple of one or two poems that to show you how just entering an image, a photograph, a painting, a stage set can bring rise to a colorful, memorable jaunt of its kind. This is Vacancy. This was a commissioned pairing, a poem pairing for a photographer friend's piece called Deserted Motel Pool. Vacancy. Travelers used to point their dark Buicks and DeSotos here and sit whitely around a blue pool at the edge of a monotonous desert until sunset painted the chrome of their fenders and grills with violet and verdigris, rose and citrus, and the ice chiming in their highballs and the swishes of their ceiling fans altered the emptiness. And here's one called A Sun-Baubled Sea. This was on John Marin's watercolor painting Sunspots from Cape Split, Maine, 1920, that I mused on at the Metropolitan Museum of Art one afternoon. Off the coarse point of another time, an unfaded ocean verges out in caps and crests of cobalt, indigo, turquoise, past one small bleach-sailed boat, toward a streaking sky where the sun becomes baubles of chrome yellow, rose, madder, viridian, and cerulean that float above the watercolor surface, that float inside my watercolored eyes. Way Out East, it's about a story character from my Theater on Paper exhibition Behind the Curtain, and he strikes quite a provocative figure in the portrait from the immersive show of that name, Way Out East, where all are invited to go off-piste. You're likely to meet this jaunty fellow, happily uncloaked, sun-baked, solo, a man unleashed, a movable feast, holding his own way out east. Wildflowers by Matthew Vetter. At 56, having left my mother, my father buys a motorcycle. I imagine him because it is the son's sorrowful assignment to imagine his father, there, hunched on his mount, with black boots, with bad teeth, between shifts at the mill, ripping furrows in the back roads, past barn and field and silo, past creek and rock, past the brown mare, sleek in her impertinence, never slowing until he sees the bull. He stops, pulls his bike to the side of the road where goldenrod and clover grow, walks up to the fence, admires its horns, its wet snout snorting and blowing its breath, its girth, its trampling of small wild flowers. Thank you, Matthew Vetter. Well, what vistas lie inside people we know or meet that can be open to us, or we can open into richly, ripely. This is Jane Hirschfield's poem, Green-Striped Melons. They lie under stars in a field. They lie under rain in a field, under sun. Some people are like this as well, like a painting hidden beneath another painting, an unexpected weight, the sign of their ripeness. Thank you, Jane Hirschfield. This is You, Green, a once love of mine back in time on a wildly serendipitous road of the heart once traveled. The color between blue and yellow, between sapphired night and sunbrushed day, on the spectrum of your visible, indivisible light, the color of your grasses, your feathers, your leaves, your living eyes, your underwater dreams. In Old Thai, Chinese, Japanese, the same word, blue or green. In ancient Greece, the same color, of undulating sea, of ruffling trees. Democritus described a pale chloron green, a leek prazinon green, while Aristotle saw it midway between black, earth, and white, water, while I see it in celadon and sea foam, your tidal pooled spirit, soul. Behold your green earth, your fireworking green sparks, lush vegetation, green vigor, wild green growth. The color of Venus you share, two great goddesses of gardens and vineyards, sacred valleys, two shades of deepening desire, of spring, summer, serpentine, all graced, all ripe, respiring, renewing, the remarkable heart-chakrid harmony, indelible hue of you. May Swenson's poem, Digging in the Garden of Age, I uncover a live root for E.W. for E.W. The smell of wet geraniums on furry leaves, transparent drops rounded as cat's eyes seen sideways. Smell of the dark earth and damp brick of the pots you held, tamped empty. Flash of the new trowel, your eyes green in greenhouse light. Smell of your cotton smock, of your neck in the freckled shade of your hair. A gleam of sweat in your lips' scoop. Pungent geranium leaves, their wet smell when our widening pupils met. Thank you, May Swenson. Bob Goff said the most beautiful scenery in the world is when our friends come into view. I'd agree, and Ed, perhaps when anyone we love comes into view, or anyone beautiful in spirit or energy, whether we know them or not, comes into view. Part of our own wonderful emotional scenery. Well, when we're traveling somewhere abroad to another country, culture, cuisine, architecture, I encourage you to leave your usual way of seeing or hearing or tasting behind and let it be more open and not studied. That embrace the otherliness, whatever captures your fancy. This was hearing in a different way. Senti, the Italian word, actually means hearing, seeing in a way. This is from Rome. Senti a Roma, listen to Rome. Today a saxophone blows rouge over the cobblestones. Here the faded yellows of accordion, guitar, and hand-tinted song spool across the piazza. There bells peal gold and umber onto the rooftops. Later, fluted silver tones blend with dancing green fountain song. Acqua verde converti until sapphire falls quiet from the night sky. Senti a Roma. Tonight, a small brass tingle of stars. I wanted to talk to you, but I think in the interest of keeping time, a room with a view, I thought figuratively about films of resonance, about going off-piste and what one finds, not just literally, but obviously metaphorically, the revealings and openings and revelings we can find there. Room with a View, the original film, the Merchant Ivory film, was one of them, which is the themes are about repressed sexuality, freedom from institutional religion growing up, and true love. I've watched it so many times, I'm actually inclined to see it again, but there's so many mentions of rooms and views, and the characters, certain characters are associated with rooms and others with views. So the more conservative ones, sort of tied up ones, are sort of locked in rooms of kinds, and the others are on the outside, representing the open, forward-thinking and modern spirits. And then they talk about the differences between Italy and England. Italy is a place of freedom and free expression. So if you haven't seen that, or not for a while, you might go back. And the other one that's marvelous is Bread and Tulips, Pane e Tulipani. It's an Italian film with my favorite actor, Bruno Ganz, G-A-N-Z. And it all takes place in an obscure corner of Venice. And so, talk about scenery. It's sort of, yes, we know all about the famous, familiar scenes of Venice, but this beautifully happens in the back corners of it. So you might want to take that in sometime. It's a poem by Liesl Müller. Scenic route. Someone was always leaving and never coming back. The wooden houses wait like old wives along this road. They are everywhere, abandoned, leaning, turning gray. Someone always traded the lonely beauty of hemlock and stony lakeshore for survival, packed up his life and drove off to the city. In the yards, the apple trees keep hanging on, but the fruit grows smaller year by year. When we come this way again, the trees will have gone wild. The houses collapsed, not even worth the human act of breaking in. Fields will have taken over. What we will recognize is the wind, the same fierce wind, which has no history. Thank you, Liesl Müller. What about the story of Robinson Crusoe? Talk about being off-piste, way off-piste. I thought of him one winter day, like Crusoe's footsteps. Instead of seeing them in the sand, I see them in the snow, the sole sign of another presence, since a demi-fierce nor'easter cloaked this woodland days before. On a castaway trail I explore between stretches of bare limbs, trunks, and hidden ground, my feet sinking and floating inches up and down through the frost whiteness, the frost coldness, as I trace ever farther into a late afternoon adventuring. Here's Henry David Thoreau on walking to reconnect with our wild nature. When we walk, we naturally go to the fields and woods. What would become of us if we walked only in a garden or a mall? Give me a wildness whose glance no civilization can endure, as if we lived on the marrow of kudus devoured raw. Life consists with wildness. The most alive is the wildest. All good things are wild and free. Thank you, Thoreau. I do believe that the more you explore the untrodden by you places that are calling, the more you will be desirous of wanting to keep going to those places, my friends. This is the astonished man, perhaps like Blaise Cendral's L'homme foudroyé, the astonished man, arrested by the revelations of the moment, a glinting sword of sun or moonlight falling across the ocean to the shore at his feet, the intoxicating musk of a forest after rain, the bare nape of a lover's neck, or the song of a robin wild bright with spring, until each day becomes a great and endless stream of astonishments, and our man makes it his mission to be still and behold more often than he bestirs and bypasses, no longer withholds his attention in connection to the extraordinary. Eric Roth in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. If you find that you're not, I hope you have the strength to start all over again. The Irish philosopher poet John O'Donoghue said this: when we domesticate our hearts and minds, we reduce our lives. So, my friends, what happens when we only live our lives in endlessly same predictable ways? What is lost? What is missed? Maybe it's time to invite our wilderness and explore it in nature and elsewhere more avidly. Sometimes we get into such a rut, and an unscenic rut, because we stop seeing freshly the things that are full of energy, of aliveness right before us, right before our eyes. But we can open them anytime, and very wide, and full of awakened wonder, like this experience flaneuring around Brooklyn and Manhattan. Everything is vivid. Everything is vivid. The curled brim of that leaving man's dove-gray fedora, the clear light falling on this young girl's yellow hair, the sensuous lips of the Waverly-scarved woman by the fountain, the sun-bronzed shoulders of a lone beachcomber, of an umbrellaed sleeper, an outspread hand on a gossamer chest framed in a looking-glass, the hips of a cream-white vase holding clouds of pale pink flowers, the morning legs of chairs turned up on the tables of closed cafes, the feet of statues standing silently inside a moving city. Yes, everything can be vivid. So as we're coming to our last few things now, before we wind out our travels together, a few quotes and a couple of poems to end. Ralph Waldo Emerson, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Tolkien, it's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there is no knowing where you might be swept off to. Helen Keller, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And Walt Whitman, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me. The Scenic, of course, is also a feeling place we can discover and enter far or near. This is in Holland, in the east of Holland, over the countryside, over Het Platteland. A tiny red plane buzzes through colossal clouds, sugar-powdered with sun. Cows look up as the pilot looks down through his leather goggles and waves a small brown hand over the landscape. The elastic engine recedes as the red plane banks and glides away west, replaced by the sound of the wind in the trees. Yes, slowly, savoringly is the best way to go, in my book anyway, anytime you can. So last for now, this poem from Stonington, Connecticut, on a slow boat. To China, or anywhere you go, float or fly or dream, by moonlight or sunlight. Always go by heartlight, with great appetite, with great spice, with an endless sense of wonder and wanderlust. Thank you again for leaning in, listening, and feeling in, and for sharing these shows with others, commenting and contributing. If you'd like to offer a thought, gift, a compliment, or a question, send along a note. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. Donations can be made in any amount by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal, or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, in the Donate tab, or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Patrons can also host me at times as a working artist, a poet in residence on a given property for a given time, later this summer, autumn, or winter, to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to them. Email me to discuss the possibilities. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, let's take the scenic route through our lives, our days, our moments, and through our inner selves as often as we can, and appreciate the interesting, unexpected, enlivening experiences that come about. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.